Part 41. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jung Word. Chapter 401. Chapter 401 Is this a crime? Violate social customs. Sunian's eyes were filled with disbelief when he heard this. What does it mean to go against customs? Is there such a crime? I'm sorry, can you tell me specifically what I violated? You must know that all our procedures are very complete and we only start with permission. Sunian is aware of Josu's ability to do things. There is no possibility of a problem. How come there is no problem? You provoked gender antagonism and caused great social harm. Miss Su, I'm sorry, you need to go to the police station with us. The current situation really makes Sunian a little confused. Gender opposition. She really didn't know about this crime. Sun Ying-er quickly spoke, as far as I know, there is no such charge. If you want to take my sister away on this charge, then it is impossible for us to agree. Sunian also reacted. This crime may not be true at all, but Huo Linyuan and others made up this reason because they wanted to suspend the draft. Haha, this male protagonist is really awesome. Sunian felt that if she saw the male protagonist, she would have to ask him if he was the master of this world. He was so powerful that he could add laws at will. It is true that there is no such charge, but in front of so many people, you instigated the antagonism between men and women and advocated it so vigorously. Isn't this undermining social stability? Undermining social order. As police officers, we should safeguard society. Law, who are you and what qualifications do you have to fight against this? Do you have the intention to harm the whole society? Hazard to the whole society. Although Sunian knows very well that talking about logic in a Mary Sue novel is a very silly thing. But, it is indeed a bit too much to involve the whole society in just a few words. If I remember correctly, Miss Sue, you are very familiar with the law. It is for this reason that you sent a person to the police station a few days ago and even faced your charges when the man said this after a pause. I think Miss Sue, you are definitely not the kind of person who can only see blackness in others but not yourself. Come prepared. I did it in accordance with the normal laws as far as I know, I haven't broken any laws yet. Miss Sue, if you think you have not broken any laws, why don't you come with us? With so many people watching now, don't you want to give an explanation? The policeman who spoke looked at Sunian with a smile. Sunian glanced at Lan Min at this moment. Although she didn't really want to admit it, this Lanzi was quite similar. Sun Ying-er spoke at this time. I did what happened this time, and I am the main person in charge. If you have anything, just come to me. Sister, they are coming for me. Sunian stopped her. But with such a menacing situation, Sun Ying-er was really a little scared. It was only then that she realized that Josu was not here. Where's Josu? When she thought of this, Sun Ying-er really wanted to kill herself. Because Josu seemed to have gone to get some clothes. Miss, when we came here, Miss Su was speaking loudly on the stage. I understand very well that you are worried about your friend, but what can we do now in the public eye? Sunian, who was originally indifferent, changed his face when he heard this. She then hurriedly said a few words in Sun Ying-er's ear. Such a few simple words also made Sun Ying-er's face change, but Sun Ying-er looked at Sunian's eyes and had no choice but to leave. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jung Word. Chapter 402. Chapter 402 Justice is in the heart of the people. I'll go with you. After all, I haven't broken any laws. Justice is in the heart of the people. Sunian took off his wheat and gave it to the staff next to him. Follow these people in full view of everyone. But before he reached the door, he heard Lan Min's voice, Uncle Yang, I'm really sorry for causing Jingjing's incident. Uncle Yang. Sunian frowned when he heard this title. What kind of drama is this? Haha. Public revenge and private revenge. However, Sunian still looked at the two of them with a half smile. But she was really a little panicked. Although she didn't have much contact with this male-female main plot in her previous life, she clearly remembered that Sunian's best friend Yang Jing did not have a father who was a policeman. N.A. Lanmin's Uncle Yang. The Uncle Yang in Lanmin's mouth ignored her and walked to Sunian's side. Little girl, you are indeed very smart. You used your knowledge of the law to successfully send the policeman's daughter to the police bureau. Police's daughter? Is this really Yang Jing's father? Sunian went through the events of his previous life in his mind and found that he couldn't find them at all. Damn it, she was mainly managing the Li group in her previous life. As long as Lan Min didn't have trouble with her, she didn't interfere at all. It can even be said that she stayed away from the main plot until Mo Bao grew up. Yang Jing is also a marginalized figure. How does she know what her father does? Sunian suddenly felt a little uneasy. The reason Sunian did whatever she wanted was because she knew the plot of the novel because she had read it, but now she realized that she didn't understand marginalized characters like Yang Jing. After all, in the Mary Sue novels, these characters are described in a few strokes, and it does not take a lot of careful pen and ink to shape them. This also made Sunian feel a crisis. But Sunian knew very well that at this time, he had to stay calm. Then it seems that I can really brag about this and write it on my epitaph. I actually brought a policeman's daughter to the police station. I can't help it. I am such a law-abiding person. Sunian deliberately mixed the two laws. The words are emphasized. Officer Yang naturally understood what Sunian meant, just abide by the law. We policemen like people who abide by the law. After all, if there are more people who abide by the law, then we policemen will have a lot less things to do and have a lot more leisure. Then I'll go and sit at the police station. Sunian walked forward calmly. Police officer Yang also followed. When Lan Min saw Sunian being taken away, his mind recalled the last time he was brought into the police station by Sunian. She would never dare to forget such a humiliating thing in her life. But she will return all these to Sunian properly. Let Sunian pay the price for what she did before. Take everything back that belongs to me and let Sunian suffer the punishment he deserves. Sunian's voice suddenly rang in Lan Min's ears. Such a sudden sound really startled Lan Min. Lan Min raised his head and saw Sunian stopping and looking at her, with an expression on his face that seemed to be a smile but not a smile. At this moment, Lan Min felt extremely embarrassed. Sunian, I think Miss Lan, that's what you think, right? If so, then do I have the ability to read minds? Oh, a despicable and shameless guy like me actually has the ability to read minds. Then Miss Lan, how could he be my opponent? After saying this, Sunian snorted arrogantly, then turned around and continued walking forward. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 403. Chapter 403 is the police car a Mercedes-Benz. Sunian noticed something was wrong when he got in the car. Because the car parked in front of her was a Mercedes-Benz. The police car is a Mercedes-Benz. Haha, although this is a Mary Sue novel. But the police department cannot be so rich. Miss Sue, why don't you get in the car? Are you still worried about what we will do to you? Officer Yang's voice rang out. That's what I said, Officer Yang, you took me away in front of so many people. If anything happens to me, you will be responsible. What can you do to me? After saying that, he got into the car directly. When the vehicle started moving, Sunian looked at the scenery outside the window casually. The car is very quiet. But there is a strange atmosphere permeating the air. Is it worth ruining your future just to vent your anger on your daughter? Officer Yang, who was sitting in the driver's seat, looked at the rearview mirror when he heard this. Ms. Su, what do you mean, what did I do? No, I'm giving you a chance. Sunian was able to get into this police car. Of course he was confident. Your plan is just like what I just said. I got into your car under the eyes of so many people. Che, anyone with any sense knows that if something happens to me, you will be linked to it, but if you think about it the other way around, if something happens to me, you can get away with it. Police Officer Yang's expression changed. Police Officer Yang stared at Sunian, and Sunian looked at her. I guess Huo Linyuan's people are waiting for me and plan to take me away, right? But Officer Yang still drove calmly. Ms. Su, do you have a little more imagination? You know what you are talking about. You are slandering public officials. Am I being slanderous? Police Officer Yang looked away. Actually, Sunian was just testing whether Officer Yang was really seeking revenge. But when she saw his avoidant eyes, she was convinced. This destination is not a police station. As for being in the public eye, haha, she sent the heroine Lanmin to the police station in full public view. This Lanmin is not just running around outside now. I'll give you a chance now, let me go, or you'll have to bear the consequences. Police Officer Yang continued to drive. I'm counting down to 5 now. 3, 2, 1. Police Officer Yang stepped on the brake, counting to 5, do you count down from 3? Sunian opened the car door and said, sorry, I forgot to tell you that I failed math. After that, he got out of the car. When she got out of the car, she saw many speeding cars. Sunian looked at the car and subconsciously took a few steps back. Although she told Sun Ying to follow her in the car and wait for her to get off the car, Sunian was not sure whether the car coming was one of theirs. Such a situation reminded Sunian of that time. Huo Linyuan wanted to take her to the operating table. The vehicle stopped in front of her. When the car stopped, a tall man got out of the car. It was none other than Li Baikan. Li Baikan walked quickly to Sunian. You still know how to be afraid, you are so brave, I thought you didn't know how to be afraid. Why are you here, and why are you here in such a timely manner? Sunian was a little confused. After all, Li Baikan told her today that he had work today, so he couldn't accompany him to record. Even if you knew you were in danger, you wouldn't have arrived in such a timely manner. As a husband, if you are in danger, you should do it in time. The reason why Li Baikan came so timely was of course because he was right next to him. Sunian and Sun Ying, two young women, made such a big fuss. It was impossible for Huo Linyuan not to do something. He had to stay by their side. This is really what he thought. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 404. Chapter 404 Li Baikan's backup plan. What should be done? Sunian was startled by these words. Leave the rest to me. Li Baikan knew very well that Huo Linyuan was now weaving a very large web, waiting for them to jump. It doesn't matter, no matter how big the net Huo Linyuan makes, he can still break it. Sunian, I don't want to leave the next thing to you. Li Baikan raised his eyes and looked at Sunian. But Sunian turned around the moment he raised his eyes. This made Li Baikan unable to see her expression at all. If I leave it to you, then Lanmin will definitely think that I am shrinking. Although I snatched you back from Lanmin, I will never lose to Lanmin in this life. Otherwise, I will be really embarrassed. On the face that Li Baikan couldn't see, Sunian's face showed a look of panic. That's right, it's panic. Damn it, when I heard this guy say, leave the rest to me, I actually felt dependent. How could I have such a thought? This made Li Baikan startled. The mentality of dependence. Could it be that But before Lee Baikin had time to be happy, he heard Sunian's voice again. How can you have such thoughts? He will not live long, so why rely on him? Should you wait until he dies, then kneel before his spirit and beg for his blessing? It's really funny. Besides, this guy is not very efficacious. It's not like I haven't prayed to him in my previous life, but I haven't had any efficacies even once. Sunian couldn't help but sneered as she thought about this. But her hand was slightly clenched. In order to distract himself, Sunian started to look around. Soon, Sunian realized something was wrong. Because the car he was riding in was motionless, Sunian suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart and hurriedly walked to the car. When she saw Officer Yang slumped on the steering wheel in the cab, she subconsciously covered her mouth and took a few steps back. What's wrong? Lee Baikin came to her side. When I saw the scene in the cab, I immediately understood what was going on. Immediately began to check Officer Yang's condition. Ifir. Sunian is a person who has lived her whole life after all. Although she was frightened, she was still able to maintain her so-called rationality and immediately realized that she had been tricked. Huo Linyuan should have prepared two plans. Whatever happens to her, something happens to Officer Yang. They are all fatal blows. Sunian immediately looked around. It was then that she realized that there were no police cars around. You must know that there were a lot of police just now, and where are their cars? As expected of the male protagonist, this game is really perfect. She was brought here on a completely unfounded charge, and then she was charged with the real charge of assaulting a police officer. In the early stage, she used unfounded charges to deceive herself, making her completely. Huo Linyuan is indeed a bit smart. Lee Baikin chuckled, and then walked up to Sunian again, but he didn't count me. Nian, you go now, I'll handle things here. Sunian frowned when he heard this. It doesn't matter if he stays here, because he is the president of the Lee group. If something goes wrong with him, Huo Linyuan will definitely use this to attack the entire Lee group, and the losses will be huge. Just when Sunian was about to say something, Lee Baikin reached out and took out something from her clothes. A black thing. Sunian was a little dazed. Lee Baikin held the thing in his hands, put it against her ear, and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "The bug also has a recording function. The recordings you and he just made were recorded." This made Sunian's eyes suddenly light up. No wonder he came so quickly. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 405. Chapter 405. Are you going to be a rogue? I think it's better for me to stay here. These guys are here for me. If anything happens to you, the entire Lee group will be implicated. Sunian took the bug from Lee Baikin's hand and said, "Put it back in your pocket." It's very dangerous. How could Lee Baikin let Sunian face Huo Linyuan alone? You must know that Huo Linyuan can do anything now. Sunian lowered his voice and said, "Then can you be a rogue?" Lee Baikin didn't understand. "Didn't you say that we have the final say in our family?" "Baikin, I am willing to do anything for you," Sunian said to the bug. And mouthed to Lee Baikin, "You are waiting by the side." Lee Baikin understood that Sunian had a plan, and then he kissed her lightly on the forehead and walked back. When Lee Baikin disappeared, she walked back to Officer Yang's side. Fortunately, Lee Baikin showed up before Huo Linyuan. Then this round, we really lost. She turned around and saw numerous police cars driving towards her. I have to say, the scene is really grand. Police cars formed a circle around Sunian, and then people in police uniforms came down and surrounded Sunian. At the same time, he also drew his gun. "Raise your hands, hold your head and squat down." The police asked Sunian to squat down and then went to check on Officer Yang. "Sunian, what have you done?" Sunian fell directly to the ground, clutching her stomach and saying with pain on her face, "Ah, my belly, come on, please save my child." The police were a little confused when they saw Sunian in this situation. Not only the police were confused, but the husband Lee Baikin was also confused. At this moment, he suddenly understood why Sunian just said, "Then can you act rogue?" Lee Baikin immediately took out his cell phone and started giving instructions. After all, the wife wants to act, and as a husband, he must have good logistics cooperation. "Please, save my child, I can't live without this child." The group of people were also confused. But it's not a big deal for Sunian to call out like this. The group could only rush her to the hospital in a hurry. They had just stepped through the door of the hospital. 2 helicopters appeared on the roof of the hospital and landed at the same time. And 2 men got off the helicopter at the same time. "Lee Baikin, it seems you really care about this woman." "She is my wife, how could I not care, she is also my life." But Huo Linyuan smiled and shook his head. "Okay, let's stop playing. Tell us your conditions. How do you want to end this game?" "Game," Lee Baikin laughed directly. "Now that Sunian has been charged with assaulting a police officer, she is in doom this time. After all, assaulting a police officer is a serious crime. With so many people watching her following the police, if anything happens to the police, she will directly responsible, even the death penalty. Lee Baikin, you should know better than anyone how much impact it will have on you if you have such a wife. Now is your last chance." Lee Baikin now felt insulted. What an opportunity! Does he have a choice now? Even if he chooses to give up on Sunian, she is still his wife now and cannot escape at all. Instead, she will still be a joke. Unless you and I will join forces to perform surgery on Jir and make Sunian disappear from this world. At the same time, I can satisfy you on one condition. This was Huo Linyuan's final bottom line. As he spoke, he took out a knife and threw it at Lee Baikin's feet. Huo Linyuan hates Sunian now. "I hate this woman, I really hate her to my core." He was even willing to bow his head to Lee Baikin to make this woman disappear. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 406. Chapter 406. The most important part of Huo Linyuan's plan. Huo Linyuan designed this game to make Sunian disappear. Because this woman, Sunian, doesn't follow the conventional routine at all, he will never be able to figure out this woman's thinking. Just like this variety show. Who in this world can think of such a way to deal with people? Huo Linyuan knew very well what Lee Baikin was thinking about Lan Min, so Sunian must die and disappear this time. At this moment, Lee Baikin just wanted to laugh. Just want to have a good laugh. The reason for this was because he saw Sunian's desperate situation. If you don't have your own consciousness, if you are still the licking dog who loves Lan Min, then you will be the knife that gives her a fatal blow. At this moment, he suddenly understood Sunian's situation. Understand why she doesn't believe in my love. If your guess is correct, this knife must have hurt her in the previous life. He was really a little lucky at this moment. Happily glad that I died early in my last life. He didn't hurt her too much. Huo Linyuan, did I forget to tell you, Lee Baikin said word by word under the gaze of Huo Linyuan, the so-called male protagonist, I don't love Lan Min, this trash. Lee Baikin, then you have to wait until your Lee Group stocks are turbulent tomorrow. There is a wife who murdered a policeman, ha ha ha, let me see how you wash it off. Lee Baikin picked up the knife and walked towards Huo Linyuan step by step. Lee Baikin, this is the last opportunity I will give you because you are Lan Min's valued brother. If you don't cherish this opportunity, then your Lee family will really be doomed. Li Baikan walked to Huo Linyuan and stood in front of him. Huo Linyuan, you've calculated everything well. You've calculated everything, but you made a mistake. That is, I don't love that trash. The next moment, he stabbed Huo Linyuan directly with the knife. The moment he inserted it, Li Baikan felt severe pain in his body, as if it was about to be torn apart. Haha, is this the price of dealing with the male protagonist? Li Baikan. It's okay. At worst, I will take your life as well. I also want to know if the Huo group can still exist without you. Even though his body was in severe pain, Li Baikan had no intention of stopping. Even so, he will die. Then he also wants to take away this so-called male protagonist. I believe that Sunian will not be as painful in this life as in the previous life. I will not be bullied by the so-called male and female protagonists. If he were to die, she would probably hate him. After all, he didn't let her get pregnant with Mo. You're crazy, Huo Linyuan did not expect that Li Baikan would choose to do this at this time. Hand should be pushed away by Huo Linyuan. Li Baikan fell directly to the ground and spit out a mouthful of blood. He stretched out his hand and wiped the corners of his mouth. What do you mean I'm crazy? Dealing with the person who hurt his wife is what every man should do. If I don't do it, then am I still a man? Why? Lan Min's shrill voice rang out. The next moment, Lan Min rushed to his side. Baikan, you said you would love me forever. You said no matter what happens, you will stand by my side. Why? Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? Love other women the way you love me. Facing Lan Min's question, Li Baikan smiled and said word by word, because you are not as beautiful as her, not as powerful as her, and not as capable as her. Haha, if I don't love such a good woman, you are worthy of being your licking dog. He covered himself in severe pain, and then walked down step by step. But before he could take a few steps, he fainted. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 407. Chapter 407 Confused. Sunian was taken to the hospital by the police. She didn't know why, but her heart ached. Then Josu hurriedly came to her. Madam, Mr. Li is injured. When he heard this, Sunian's heart suddenly tightened. How could something happen to him? Huo Linyuan's attention was clearly on him. Wasn't he hiding in the dark? Sunian then followed Josu to the emergency room in a hurry. Wherever you go. Lan Min appeared in front of her. It's all you, it's all you. If it weren't for you, how could Baikan not love me? Give Baikan back to me. Give Baikan who loves me back to you. Sunian is still confused now. What happened? If it wasn't you, then how could Baikan not love me? It's all you. Did something happen to Li Baikan? This thought appeared in Sunian's mind, and she trembled all over. Josu controlled Lan Min in time. Josu, let me go, it's this woman. It's because of her that Baikan won't follow Linyuan's orders. It's all because of this woman. Josu followed him all the time. But when he saw Huo Linyuan getting off the helicopter, he stopped on it. Think about being able to adapt to changes. So Josu knew exactly what happened. Seeing Lan Min like this now, he felt angry in his heart. He immediately grabbed Lan Min's hand and threw him roughly to the ground. Is there any reason to carry out Huo Linyuan's order? Why should I do it according to Huo Linyuan's wishes, kill his wife according to his wishes? Lanji, who do you think you are? Sunian looked at Josu. Madam, according to Mr. Li's plan, we rushed to the hospital first, and then bribed the doctor to complete the scene. However, Huo Linyuan stopped him and wanted Mr. Li to join forces with him to hurt you. Otherwise, Huo Linyuan, with the wife of the CEO of Li Group, attacked a police officer, so he was furious. Josu paused at this point. Mr. Lee said that dealing with those who hurt their wives is what every man should do. If I don't do it, then am I still a man? Sunian's brain buzzed. Madam, Mr. Lee really loves you to the core. Does Lee Baikan really love him? Sunian was really confused. At the same time, many pictures came to mind. He said love. Say that you like it. Speak various things. Why is this happening? Why? Sunian's eyes were full of disbelief. Josu, you are talking nonsense. It is impossible for Baikan to love her. The person Baikan loves is me, not her. Who is she? I am the person Baikan loves most. Back then, Baikan gave it to me. Lanmin at this moment, feeling that she was about to lose something very important in her life, she desperately wanted to catch it, and then she wanted to rush to Sunian again. But she has not yet arrived in front of Sunian. But this time, she missed the mark. Because someone picked up Sunian. Sunian didn't react at all. At this moment, a deep voice sounded in her ears. I won't let anyone hurt you. Even if I am on the operating table, as long as I know someone wants to hurt you, I will crawl to your side to protect you. Sunian raised his eyes and saw Lee Baikan's serious expression. Faced with such an expression, Sunian couldn't help but raise her hand, wanting to touch his face. But before she could touch him, the man held her hand. I am alive, not a ghost. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 408. Chapter 408, You didn't even cry at the grave, Lan Min, you are really good enough. Instead of crying here, it's better to cry for your man. After all, Huo Linyuan is not out of danger yet. Lan Min was startled when he heard this. Lee Baikan's disdainful voice sounded again, You didn't even cry in the grave, right, Lan Min, you are really good enough. Speaking, he hugged the person and left. Are you okay? Sunian couldn't help but ask Lee Baikan's clothes. Lee Baikan certainly knew what this little woman was worried about. I'm fine, I just got hit accidentally during the fight. But your husband is much better than that guy, so don't worry, I'm fine, Lee Baikan coaxed softly. But the next moment, Sunian, who had been obediently in Lee Baikan's arms, began to be dishonest. Put me down. Sunian struggled too hard. Lee Baikan had no choice but to stop, carefully let go of the person and put him on the ground. You fainted and even entered the emergency room. How could you be fine? Only then did Sunian's rationality return. Oh, with my brain, how could Lee Baikan be okay after being rushed to the emergency room? When Sunian thought of this, he once again recalled what Lee Baikan had just said to him. I will not let anyone hurt you. Even if I am on the operating table, if you let me know that someone wants to hurt you, I will crawl to your side. These words successfully made Sunian's heart burn. But she quickly drove these random thoughts out of her mind. How can it be okay? You have to do a full body examination. You have to go. If you don't do the examination honestly, I will. If you feel uncomfortable, I won't treat you honestly. You have to set an example for me. There was no other way, Lee Baikan could only do the examination obediently. Last inspection lap down. There was no problem, and Sunian breathed a sigh of relief. Lee Baikan smiled subconsciously when he saw Sunian heaving a sigh of relief. In fact, after he fainted, he dreamed about his previous life again. This time it was really worth it. This time he dreamed of Mo Bao saying that he wanted to get rid of Lan Min and Huo Linyuan. Kill the male and female protagonists to death. That's all you need to get away from it all. But when he inserted the knife into Huo Linyuan's body, the severe pain in his body was not false at all. So you really can't mess around. It cannot be killed directly. According to what Sunian said before, they must go through the entire plot of the book, and then kill them after the plot is over. Going through the entire plot, he is so patient. Lee Baiken knew this, and he felt that he had to test carefully how to send this bad couple away in advance. We still have to find a way to do this. Take it easy. He looked at Sunian, who was talking seriously to the doctor. Lee Baiken knew very well that what he mainly wanted was to kill the male and female protagonists. Rather, I want to spend a lifetime with this woman and make up for her previous life. So Lee Baiken knew exactly what to do next. Sunian was completely relieved when the doctor confirmed that there was nothing wrong with Lee Baiken. Then he returned his gaze to Lee Baiken. Should I ask the doctor, can Lee Baiken's shortness be cured? Asking at this moment? Are you worried that they might get injured in a fight? The smile on Lee Baiken's face suddenly froze. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 409. Chapter 409, What property of the Huo family do you value? Can I take it for you? Sunian did not ask in the end. Because Lee Baiken's gaze was a little too hot, and she really couldn't speak. Go home. Sunian fell on the sofa, still brainstorming in his mind. She was really careless about what happened today. Yang Jing didn't take it seriously and was almost fooled. Why would Yang Jing appear at the door of the company for no reason, and then accuse her and provoke her inexplicably? Did Huo Linyuan start planning from that moment on? A false accusation made her relax her vigilance, and then let herself follow it honestly. Yang Jing's father had an accident and she was convicted of death. A guilty person is destined to cry behind bars. Add the relative who appeared before. She became an ant that could be crushed to death at any time in Huo Linyuan's hands. When he thought of this, Sunian turned his attention to the man who took off his suit jacket. If this man really chose to be with Huo Linyuan at that time, you will have to pay a heavy price for your carelessness, and you may even lose your life. Lee Baiken felt Sunian's gaze. I didn't believe in retribution before, but now I do. Susu, do you know how I feel when I hear that Huo Linyuan wants to join forces with me to kill you? Sunian obviously didn't expect that Lee Baiken would say this directly. After all, at that moment, I felt that I was ridiculous. I lived to the point where even my former love rivals didn't believe that I was now in love with my wife. You may not know that Huo Linyuan's determination made me feel like I was a fool. Lee Baiken's words half-truth and falsehood. He also wanted Sunian to know that he firmly chose her. Won't hurt her. Even if Sunian didn't believe it, he still wanted to say it. But such ridiculous things won't happen again in the future. After all, I have found my way back now. Josu's words came to Sunian's mind. Madam, Mr. Lee really loves you to the core of his heart. Love to the core. Bone. When Sunian retracted her thoughts, the man was already standing in front of her. He bent down and embraced the person in his arms. If I were really a knife, then I would only stab the person who hurt you. And the only person in this world who can hold the handle of my knife is you, and only you. After Lee Baiken finished speaking, Sunian struggled subconsciously. But the harder Sunian struggled, the more ruthless the man became. Baiken, you hurt me. Hearing this, Lee Baiken quickly let go. What's wrong? I hurt you. I'm sorry Susu, I didn't mean it. I'm fine. I know what you mean. Baiken, don't be too excited. I really know your thoughts. Your thoughts make me happy and make me feel very happy. Ah, I can really feel it now. I am the happiest woman. Lee Baiken subconsciously moved his body back when he saw the woman in front of him talking. This kind of subconscious behavior, which occurs when he has not heard her voice, can best reflect the truest situation in her heart. She is resisting herself and distrusting. Hey, it seems that we still have to work hard. Okay, let's get down to business now. I estimate that Huo Linyuan will be in a coma for a few days. I think we should use this opportunity to make Huo Linyuan pay the price for his actions. Li Baikan changed the topic. You like the Huo family, what kind of property can I take from you? End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 410. Chapter 410, You have to maintain the image of a little white flower. Li Baikan's words really made Sunian feel like she was the heroine. As long as you say you want it, then the male protagonist or the male supporting actor will do everything possible to get it. At this moment, Li Baikan approached her and put his big palm on his belly. After all, our child is gone. Due to both emotions and reasons, we have to let the Huo family pay for our child's life. Sunian. She could clearly feel the man's warm palm. Ahem, cough, cough, how do you explain the matter about the child? I had a problem with my brain at that time, so I just wanted to see who I could rely on, so I just said something powerful. I still remember that when those people heard what I said, they were so frightened that they quickly backed away, as if I had some infectious disease. However, I still have to pretend to be a little bit in front of Li Baikan. After all, in this guy's eyes, I am just a little white flower. If he knows that I am not that kind of weak and innocent little flower, then all my previous efforts will not be in vain yet. Little white flower. Li Baikan almost laughed when he heard these three words. Then he watched Sunian clear her throat, came closer to him, and said cautiously, Baikan, about the children, I was really scared and anxious at the time. I thought I had to make them scared, so I came up with it. Don't you blame me for this idea. How can I blame you? You are so smart and can protect yourself. I am happy before it is too late. After Huo Linyuan fell, the senior executives of the Huo group were all guarding the hospital, looking angry. Li Baikan really went too far this time. Why did he treat Linyuan like this? They were really cruel. They just didn't take our Huo family seriously at all. Yes, we must fight back fiercely this time to let the Li family know how powerful we are. The senior management spoke angrily, each speaking as loudly as possible. Even to the point of being noisy. They were doing this to test what kind of condition Huo Linyuan was in, whether he was awake or not. If he was awake, they could use this opportunity to show off their so-called presence in front of Huo Linyuan and let Huo Linyuan see his loyalty. If you don't wake up, then there is naturally a way to stay awake. Lan Min stood at the door of the ward with a pale face. In the end, the voices of these high-level officials were too much, so Lan Min said, Everyone, your voices are a little loud. Can you please lower your voices? After all, Linyuan is still recuperating in the intensive care unit of the important town. When Lan Min said this, everyone's eyes immediately focused on her. Lan Min was a little uncomfortable being stared at like this, but he still forced a smile. Everyone, I know you are worried about Linyuan now, but it's not a problem for you to stay here. Let's go back first. Well, if there is any news about Linyuan, I will definitely inform you. You must know that Lan Min's words completely reminded these senior executives that they had lost important cooperation projects because of this woman's intervention. Even for a long time in the future, he will be suppressed and beaten by the Li family. They couldn't be angry at all, but because Huo Linyuan was protecting him before, it was difficult for them to get in touch with Lan Min. Now that Lan Min is in front of me. Although you can't do anything to Lan Ji directly, you can still make a few sarcastic remarks. End of this chapter.